water. So verse 2, when there was no water, the people began to grumble and complain against Moses. And before we criticize them, let me ask you, how long do you think it would take the residents of Atlanta to get upset and begin pestering our government officials if the entire area had no water and nobody knew when we would have water? Better yet, how long would it take before you started calling City Hall the mayor, the governor? When your children didn't have any water and nobody could tell you when. Come on, somebody be real with me. Even though they knew their miraculous had been delivered, their deliverance had been miraculous. When there was no water, verse 3, they became irate and angry. So verse 4, in desperation, Moses cried out to the Lord. But verse 5, when God answered Moses' prayer, God did not lead him to a Niagara Falls or to a Chattahoochee River or even to some desert oasis. No, verse 6, God led him to a rock. My heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to
the rock.
Rock. Get the picture. They are wandering in a wilderness desert. All they can see is sand and rock. And what looked like just another detail of their deserted landscape, what appeared to be just a reminder of the hopelessness of their impossible situation, God led Moses to a rock. Talk about stretching your faith. And then with all the leadership watching, God told Moses to hit the rock so water would come out of it, enough water for all the people to drink all they wanted, plus all their livestock and animals. Just some quick calculations. The average human being needs about 85 ounces of water a day. But that need increases with heat and exercise. And these approximately 4 million Hebrews were traveling by foot, physically carrying all their earthly belongings in a hot desert wilderness. Even if we use conservative figures and say that each person just needed 85 ounces of water, that would still be 2.5 million gallons of water every day, which does not calculate the increase due to the heat, exhaustion, and exercise. Nor does it include the water needed for their livestock. An average cow drinks 25 gallons a day. A donkey drinks 10 gallons. A sheep drinks 2. One researcher's conservative estimate is that to quench the thirst of the Hebrew nation and all their livestock, it would take at least 11 million gallons of water every single day. Another researcher's calculation is that it would take a train of tank cars 1,800 miles long every day to bring that much water. And Moses, knowing the magnitude of the need, stood looking at a rock, which God said would be the source and the supply of more than enough. Only faith in God would cause anybody to strike a rock expecting water. And yet when Moses did exactly what God said, God did exactly what he promised. When Moses struck the rock, millions of gallons of water flowed from it, enough to satisfy the thirst of an entire nation. Somebody say amen. In Scripture, that is the last mention of this rock experience until 39 years later. In Numbers 20 verse 2, when again there was another crisis. 39 years later, practically an entirely new generation. Those who were just children back in Exodus 17 were now the adults and the leaders. And tragically, instead of learning from their history, they repeated history. And that when there was no water, this new generation responded exactly as had their parents and their grandparents 39 years earlier. Verse 3, they quarreled with Moses and said, "Why did you bring the Lord's community out into this desert that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt into this terrible place?" And so verse 6, in desperation, Moses and Aaron had a prayer meeting and noticed that the glory of the Lord appeared to them. When everything was going wrong, the glory of the Lord was still there. Why? Because He'll never leave us or forsake us. Which means that His glory is with us even in problems. His glory is with us even in confusion. Come on. Even in difficulty. Even when you're facing opposition. Even when what we are going through does not feel glorious. He is still with us. He is still working everything together for our good. He is present in our circumstance. Somebody say amen. Numbers 20 verse 8, the Lord told Moses, "Take your staff and everyone and gather everybody together, and then with everybody watching, speak to that rock. And that rock will supply more than enough water." Back in Exodus 17, God had to explain to Moses by name which rock He was talking about. But this time the insinuation is that Moses already knew what rock God was talking about. And the reason Moses knew which rock is explained in 1 Corinthians 10, which says, "For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and they all passed through the sea. And they were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And they all ate the spiritual food, and they drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from that spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ." The New Living says it like this: "All of them drank the same miraculous water, for they all drank from the miraculous rock that traveled with them." The King James says it followed them. And that rock was Christ. I cannot tell you how God did it, but all I know is what was just a piece of the bleak landscape of their impossible situation back in Exodus 17 was still there 39 years later in Numbers 20. God took what looked like a part of a bad situation and not only used it to do the incredible, but also to be a part of blessing for the next 39 years. For 39 years, that rock followed them in all of their travels in the wilderness. For 39 years, whenever they found themselves between a rock and a hard place, that rock was the same rock that had been there the last time. For 39 years, God moved that rock to wherever they were, and whenever they needed it, the rock was still there. So 1 Corinthians 10:4 says that the rock was Christ. What they needed when they needed it, that rock represented everything Jesus is. For He is that very present help in a time of trouble. Can I get a witness right now? He is a way maker when there seems to be no way to be made. He is the source of every good and perfect blessing. He is the rock upon which His church is built, and hell at its strongest cannot and will never be able to prevail against it. Jesus Christ is the rock of our salvation. Somebody say amen. And on Calvary, once and for all, Jesus paid the price for every sin, for every sickness, for every need, because He was smitten, because He was beaten, because He was wounded. We are forgiven, we are free, and we are healed. Somebody say amen. In Exodus 17, God told Moses to hit the rock. But in Numbers 20, God told Moses to speak to the rock. The first time the rock had to be beaten. But the next time, the water was there just for the asking. And I said, the first time the rock had to be beaten. But the next time, water was there for the asking. The point is that Jesus was beaten once. And that was enough. He was wounded once for our transgressions. And he was bruised once for our iniquities. And he was punished once for our peace. And he was beaten once for our healing. Once was enough. And now everything that he paid the price for us to have is ours for the asking. Enough blood has already been shed for your forgiveness. Enough stripes have already been placed upon his back for your healing. Enough price has been paid to prove how much he loves you. He's already been beaten. And once was enough. And now everything he paid the price for is ours for the asking. Somebody worship him right now. He is the God who moves rocks. So that Good Friday, when they nailed his pulverized body to that cruel cross, after suffering on that splintering tree for 6 long agonizing hours, he took his final breath and laid down his life willingly for all humanity. Matthew 27:59, that same evening, the Roman governor Pilate allowed a man named Joseph to take the Lord's body. Joseph wrapped it in a clean cloth, placed it in his own new tomb, and then rolled a large stone in front of the entrance to that tomb. Verse 62, the next day the religious leaders went to the throne and went to the Roman governor Pilate. Said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I'll rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised. So verse 65, Pilate gave his orders for a guard to be posted, telling those religious leaders to make the tomb as secure as they could. And in verse 66, that's exactly what they did. Get the picture. He's dead. Thousands had witnessed it. There was no denying he was dead. In kindness, Joseph had taken the Lord's body and placed it in a new tomb. Had finished the process by rolling a large stone in the front of its entrance. Pilate, complying with the wishes of the religious elite, secured that tomb, placed the seal upon it, posted a guard. That stone that blocked the entrance to that tomb. The plan of both Joseph and the Pharisees was to keep anyone from going in, and also to keep anybody from taking the Lord's body out. But if they had really known who it was in that tomb, if they had realized the true identity of the one they had gone to such extremes to keep contained, if they just had the revelation of who dwelt in that body, for the power that moved that rock in the wilderness for 40 years was resident inside that tomb. And for 40 years, he had demonstrated that he specializes in moving rocks. So come that Sunday morning, just about daybreak, there was an earthquake. And the ground began to shake as God began to move the stone. What Joseph had taken such diligence to place, and what the Roman government had gone to such great lengths to seal and to guard, in just one moment it was rolled away as Jesus Christ arose triumphant over death and the grave and every power of hell. The I Am proved again that he is still the God who moves stone. Jesus taught, Mark 11:22, have faith in God. I tell you the truth, if anyone says to this mountain, somebody say amen. Amen. Said, I'm not lying to you. This is the truth. Amen. If anyone speaks to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart and believes, it will be done. The anthem of his entire ministry was, God is greater than your dilemma, for he is the God who moves stones. Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell might have sung it, but it could be God's theme song. Ain't no mountain high enough. There ain't no valley low enough. There ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you. There's no shadow He won't light up, mountain He won't climb up. There's no wall He won't kick down, lie He won't tear down. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. But Romans 8:38, I am persuaded that neither death nor life, angels or principalities, powers or things present or things to come, not height nor depth nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus. Somebody say amen. Get the picture. There is not a mountain big enough to ever compete with the power and the majesty and the love of your God. That giant rock that seems to be blocking your progress, that mountain that looms on your horizon, that problem you cannot seem to get over, that situation that keeps you locked in defeat and keeps you blocked from being blessed. I come to tell you today that He is still the God